The first time humans panicked that a new technology would ruin the human mind, it wasn't about AI. It wasn't about smartphones. It was about writing. That should sound absurd. Writing built civilization. But the panic was real. It was documented by one of the most respected thinkers in history, and it never actually stopped. It just changes shape every few centuries. Right now, it's aimed at AI. Here's the story most people never hear. In the 4th century BC, the philosopher Socrates argued that writing would be a disaster for the human mind. Not a minor inconvenience, a disaster. His student Plato recorded the argument in a dialogue called the Phaedrus, and Socrates' logic was simple. If people could write things down, they would stop training their memory. They'd carry the appearance of wisdom without the substance of it. They'd become forgetful, shallow, dependent on marks on a page instead of knowledge held inside their own minds. Socrates was, in a narrow sense, correct. People who write things down do remember less of it. That effect is real, and it's been measured. But he was wrong about what it meant because he assumed the unassisted human memory was the real version of thinking, and anything that offloaded part of that work was a corruption of it. Here's the reframe that should change how you think about this. There was never an unassisted human mind to protect in the first place. Philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers published a paper in 1998 that's now considered a foundational text in cognitive science, called The Extended Mind. Their argument was direct. When you use a notebook, a calculator, or a map, that tool isn't just helping your brain. Under the right conditions, it functionally becomes part of your cognitive process, the same way a part of your brain would. You don't experience your notebook as external to you when you're relying on it to remember an address. You experience it as an extension of your own memory. Clark and Chalmers weren't describing something new that started with computers. They were describing something that's true of a knotted string used to count sheep, a tally mark scratched into a bone, and a shopping list on your phone, equally. So the question was never really, should humans offload thinking onto tools? Humans have been doing that since long before Socrates was born. The real question is, what happens to a skill once you stop needing to carry it yourself? Psychologists Evan Risco and Sam Gilbert reviewed decades of research on exactly this in 2016, in a paper that helped define the modern study of what's called cognitive offloading. Their conclusion was straightforward and a little uncomfortable. When a reliable external tool is available, people reliably use it instead of their own internal effort, and the internal skill quietly weakens from disuse. This isn't laziness, it's efficiency. Your brain is extremely good at not spending energy maintaining a skill it doesn't need to maintain, and it will let that skill fade the moment something outside your head can do the job instead. You can watch this happen in real time with a piece of technology you've probably used this week. Neuroscientists Luisa Damani and Veronique Bobo published a study in 2020 tracking people who habitually rely on GPS navigation. The people who let a GPS do the wayfinding for them showed measurably worse spatial memory over time, along with reduced activity in the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for building mental maps. The skill wasn't gone because their brains were broken. It was gone because their brains, quite reasonably, stopped investing resources in a job the phone was now doing for free. This is where the story usually turns into a warning. It's tempting to hear all of this and conclude that GPS made people worse navigators, calculators made people worse at arithmetic, and now AI is going to make people worse at writing, thinking, and reasoning. Full stop, end of story, be afraid. But that's not actually what the last 2,400 years of evidence shows. Here's the twist. Every single one of these tools, without exception, also made humans capable of things that were previously impossible. Writing didn't just weaken raw memory. It allowed law, contracts, historical record, and complex trade across distances no single memory could hold. Calculators didn't just weaken mental arithmetic. They allowed engineers to design buildings, bridges, and spacecraft with a level of precision and speed no unaided human mind could match. GPS didn't just weaken spatial memory. It allowed millions of people to navigate unfamiliar cities, coordinate emergency response, and route global shipping with a reliability human memory alone never offered. The pattern isn't decline, it's trade. Every generation loses a raw internal skill and gains a collective capability that raw skill could never have produced on its own. Socrates lost a civilization of people with trained oral memory. He gained, whether he wanted it or not, a civilization capable of written law, science, and history. That trade wasn't optional once enough people made it. It became the floor everyone else had to build on. And that's the part of this that should actually concern you, though not for the reason you'd expect. Once a society builds its institutions, its economy, and its expectations around a cognitive tool, there's no real path back to the version of the mind that existed before it. You can't have modern medicine, engineering, or global logistics running on unaided memory the way Socrates wanted. The tool becomes load-bearing. Removing it doesn't restore some purer version of human thought. It just collapses the systems now depending on it. This is exactly the shape of the anxiety you're hearing about AI right now, and it's worth naming directly. Researcher Sandra Matz, who studies the psychology of AI at Columbia Business School, has raised a related but distinct concern. That AI systems trained to predict and satisfy what you already like may be quietly narrowing human personality and creative range, nudging millions of people toward more similar tastes, opinions, and default responses. That's a real, current, and different question from Socrates' worry about memory. It's not just, will this skill fade? It's, will this tool start shaping what kind of person you become, at a scale no notebook or calculator ever could? That's worth taking seriously precisely because AI, unlike a calculator, can talk back, adapt to you personally, and shape the options you see next. So where does that leave you? Sitting here right now, maybe having used an AI tool sometime today, without thinking twice about it? Not in the position Socrates thought he was in, guarding the last pure version of the human mind against corruption. You were never that. Your memory has been extended by writing since before you could read. Your arithmetic has been extended by calculators since grade school. Your sense of direction has been extended by a phone in your pocket for over a decade. Every one of those extensions cost you something specific and real, and bought you something specific and real in return, and you didn't get a vote on most of them, because by the time you were old enough to have an opinion, the trade had already been made by the generation before you. What you do get a vote on, unlike Socrates, is which parts of this new extension you let shape you passively, and which parts you use deliberately. The skill that fades from disuse is a known, predictable cost, the same one every tool before this one is charged. The part Sandra Matz is pointing at, the quiet narrowing of what you like, think, and create, is the newer and less understood cost, and it's the one actually worth paying attention to, because unlike memory or arithmetic, nobody has 2,000 years of hindsight to tell you how it plays out. The first time humans panicked that a new technology would ruin the human mind, it wasn't about AI, and it won't be the last time either. But you're not defending some untouched original version of human thought. You're the latest link in a chain of trades that built everything you rely on. And the only real choice in front of you is whether you make this next trade on purpose.